You know why I'm rubbing my hands together, because today's show is all about the REL HT1003 Mark II subwoofer. Now, just recently, I did a video about upgrading your system and how it usually doesn't last. The excitement that you had at first with the new thing, the new speaker, the new amp, the new whatever, it's exciting at first, but then a month later, 2 months later, it becomes the new normal, and you just sort of take it for granted, right? But that is so much less likely to happen when you get the right sub. Now, when I say the right sub, I mean the right sub for your room and a blend with your speakers. When it's all lined up, that kind of change is so big and so fundamental. And I don't mean fundamental as in the deepest bass. I'm talking about the overall sound of the system. The mid-range, even the treble, and the soundstage can improve with the right subwoofer. It just does. I mean, when I started doing this, reviewing subwoofers like 30 years ago, I was kind of surprised by how big of a change subs made, and not just in the bottom end. So, and many people have made this and made similar observations about what subwoofers bring to the party. Now, before I get further into the review, yeah, there will be an Audiophiliac viewer system of the day, and I also want to plug my interviews. It's just a thing for me. I love doing interviews like the recent one I did with Yale, who owns his own record company, Luwakabop. We have an interesting dynamic. And Jeff, who's a violinist who has his own string quartet, and he has a Maggie LRS and a REL subwoofer. Man, this guy is a serious musician, world-class musician, but a world-class audiophile. Great chemistry. Oh, and one more. About a year ago, I interviewed Matt, who has his own record company. He's based in Rockaway, New York, where I grew up. And it was great to go back to Rockaway and just meet this guy who's just like, you know, down in the trenches, a blue-collar recording engineer with his own studio, recording mostly analog. So anyway, check out those 3 interviews if I've made you curious. But as for the star of today's show, the REL HT1003 Mark II. Well, it's a sealed box sub, not a ported subwoofer. It has a 10-inch carbon glass woofer, which looks similar to the one in the original HT1003, but it has a bigger magnet, an improved suspension system, lots of detail changes to the driver. It's matched to a 300-watt Class D amplifier that also has improvements starting with the power supply. There's lots of detail changes throughout the sub. Oh, and by the way, it looks nicer than the original model, which looked, I don't know, not that special. But the new one looks more like a REL. The top panel is really snazzy. It's finished in 5 coats of black lacquer, hand polished. Very nicely done. Oh, and the sub sits on those really cool, very chunky REL feet. It's kind of a style cue that they seem to have in many of their subwoofers, probably all of them. When we take a look at the back panel, looks kind of standard. Although, one thing that is interesting, if you're a REL guy, that it does not have a speaker level input. Now, I've seen that on every REL, forever, for decades and decades. This one only has RCA, line level inputs and outputs. So in other words, the outputs are to daisy chain this sub with another sub, presumably another HT1000 Mark II. But in any case, yeah, so there's inputs, outputs, a low pass filter that runs from 30 hertz to 200 hertz, and of course a volume control, and a phase switch that switches from 0 to 180 degrees. Now, it doesn't have an app. It doesn't have a remote control, which are features that are important to a lot of people, but you're not going to find them here. But it does have a wireless adapter, the HT Air, that REL makes that costs $119. Oh, and the price of the subwoofer, I didn't mention that up to this point, it is $699. The warranty is 3 years. That's pretty good. That's above average. Oh, it is designed in the US and made in China. Now, over the course of this review, I paired the HT1003 Mark II with 4 separate pairs of speakers. the Dirty Weekend 6, that's the Zu DW6, the PureAudioProject Duet15 Prelude, the KEF LS50 META, and the speaker that I'm going to start with, the Maggie LRS Plus. Now, the LRS Plus is a phenomenal speaker, but it is a bass challenge, to say the least. It doesn't make a lot of bass, and what's there isn't particularly punchy or dynamic. So this was a natural place to start. And the thing was, it definitely supported the speaker and made it sound like, here's the best part, when it's all dialed in just right, it makes the LRS Plus sound like a bigger speaker, a bigger Magnepan. It's closer to the overall balance you'd get from the Magnepan 0.7 or maybe even the 1.7i. So yes, adding the right sub, or actually better even yet, 2 subs, makes the LRS sound bigger with more impact, more fullness. It's not, like I say, it's not just about adding deep bass. It's about changing the tonal balance of the speaker to make it sound like a bigger speaker. And as an added benefit, yeah, the sound stage does get bigger with a subwoofer. I've never really quite understood why that's so, but I know that forever, because that's, with my entire history with subwoofers, that was one of the things that totally knocked me out at first was, wow, it's not just about adding bass. Everything else changes too. In some ways, even the top end sounds different because it's balanced out. The bass, mid-range, treble balance changes when you add a sub. So yeah, even the treble, the high frequencies of a speaker seem to be, psychoacoustically, they seem to be affected by the addition of a subwoofer. Now, I have a feeling that some of you may be wondering, or talking to your screens right now, wondering, did I high pass the speakers to ease the load on the speakers, all the speakers I used, by feeding them less bass and let all the bass be handled by the REL? And the answer is no. I don't like the sound of high-passing speakers. Yes, I know that they will play louder with less distortion, but that's not the point of what I'm trying to do here. I'm going for sound quality, not how loud the system will play. So if you're not interested in making the system play as loud as it possibly can, you don't need to high-pass the speakers. Just saying that, just want to get that out of the way up front. As for the recordings I used with the REL and the Maggie combination, this one by Oscar Peterson is one of my favorites because, first, it's a really good recording and the music is spectacular, but also because Oscar's playing the full keyboard from the low bass to the mids and the highs, and that's how I determine when the sub is optimally blended with the Maggies. And it's also fun to listen to. Because the more you listen to Oscar, man, he's doing so much there. It's not tiresome to hear him play these same things over and over again because he's such a great musician. Another recording that I love, I like the movie, I like the music even better. Francis Ford's Dracula. Now, this score is big and bad and deep and really, really powerful sounding. So it really exercises a subwoofer. And again, it was about getting the blend between the REL and the Maggie to be as smooth as I could. And overall, I was very happy with it. Oh yeah, and the spatial aspects of this recording were definitely improved by having the REL in the system with the LRS. Now, the next one I tried was the Zu DW6 6. Now, the DW6 6 has a 10-inch woofer, 10-inch full-range driver. It makes a substantial amount of bass on its own, way more bass thanZus of old, of previous times. This speaker is very full-sounding and rich-sounding, and I was thinking, well, what will the REL bring to the party? Well, the REL definitely went deeper and just move the room. Yeah, that's what it did. It moved the room more than the Dirty Weekend did by itself, and by a considerable amount. But I kept thinking, but I don't know. The Zu all by itself is so satisfying. So unless you're the type that wants to, you're playing a lot of electronic music or dance music or home theater stuff, yeah, definitely the REL will do the trick for you. For me, for music all by itself, the DW6 was fine sans sub. The next dance partner was this one, PureAudioProject Duet15 Prelude. Now this guy, this bad boy, has a 15-inch open baffle woofer. It is very fast, very nimble. Pitch definition is extraordinary. I will be reviewing the PureAudioProject very, very soon. But I was curious how a 10-inch subwoofer would match up with a speaker with a 15-inch woofer. And you know what? It actually worked very, very well. Because all I was asking the REL to do was the very, very bottom. I had the low pass set just one notch up from 30 hertz, and I was just sort of sneaking it in right on the bottom. And when I played that Dracula score that has a lot of big drums and weight to it, it definitely was supplying a better, deeper foundation to the sound. And yes, adding to soundstage depth and space and ambience, all that stuff was definitely improved with the REL in the system. Yeah, okay, so we're going to do one more pairing. I didn't forget the KEF LS50 META. Now it's a small stand mount speaker. Again, makes more bass than you'd think for such a small speaker, but definitely can use some support on the low end. And this matchup was the easiest one of all to get that blend just right. Now I remember when I reviewed KEF subwoofer, the KC62. That marriage was just made in heaven. Made in heaven. But that sub is $1,500 and it's designed to work with the LS50. This one, just like how well would this work? Now I don't have the KC62 here to directly compare, but I will say I was amazed how easy it was to get the blend just right. Now I was crossing over much higher, I think around 80 hertz. Now remember, this isn't like a sharp cutoff at 80 hertz. It doesn't work that way. It's a roll off. But anyway, I was crossing over higher because it is a small speaker. And I'm playing all the usual suspects. I'm playing Oscar Peterson. I'm playing all sorts of things. Koyaanisqatsi. You know, I really like this combination because it makes everything about the LS50 META sound better. The imaging, which is a real strength of this speaker, just gets deeper and bigger and more spacious. Everything about it is better. And of course, adding the low end that's keeping up. It's fast. It definitely can keep up with the LS50 META. You know, I was playing vinyl over the course of this review. I haven't mentioned it up to this point, but I was playing the Rolling Stones' Still Life, which is a live recording from the early 1980s. The Stones are still young 40 years ago. And wow. And the thing is, I didn't like the sound of this record when it came out. I thought it was just something weird about the mix that turned me off. But now, listening to it over the LS50 META and the REL, it sounds really good. Oh man, Charlie Watts, the drummer, is just hitting it so hard. And Bill Wyman, who was not in the band that much longer, his bass lines and Charlie's drumming were just, the rhythm section was so locked in. And I could really feel it. I was just moving in my seat to the Stones at their relatively youthful vigor, and it was fantastic. So yeah, and remember, I'm not high passing the speaker, I'm just letting the speaker run full range, and I'm listening, you know, loud-ish, high 80 dB range. So it worked perfectly well. So speaking of working perfectly well, it is now time for, so Steve, what do you really think of the REL HT 1003 Mark II? Well, I should have mentioned this earlier, that the name HT implies that this is a home theater subwoofer, designed for home theater. And indeed, it is. But turns out it works very, very well for music. It's fast, it's deep. Ultimately, it doesn't call attention to itself, which is a really important thing for a subwoofer. You want to feel like all that room-shaking bass isn't coming from a sub. You want to feel like it's coming from the speakers. When that's happening, you're in. You hit the jackpot. You can stop fussing. And that's what was happening over and over again. Is it the best sub I've ever heard? No. Matter of fact, I'm not so sure that the other REL that I reviewed earlier this year, the T0, isn't a better match with the Maggies, with the LRS Plus. I think it is. It's not as powerful, but just in terms of the overall vibe, I think that's the better match. But I'd say with all the other speakers in this review today, the HT 1003 would be the better partner, better dance partner. I think REL has been through this rodeo a bunch of times. They know how to make great sounding subs. That's what they specialize in. And specialization with subwoofers definitely counts. And now it's time for the Audiophiliac viewer system of the day. Hey, this one comes from Mario. He lives in Maryland and he has an all digital setup. He's streaming Qobuz through a Chord Hugo DAC. And the DAC is connected to a linear tube audio MZ2 tube preamp, which feeds a linear tube audio Zodal 40 reference power amp with EL34 tubes. The speakers are Totem Element Fire, and the sub is the KEF KC62. Nice going, Mario. Alrighty, we are back. My name is Steve Guttenberg. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for watching this far into the video. If you dig what I do here on the channel, please consider joining my Patreon. You can join for a couple of months. Some people stay for years. Whatever works best for you. And Patreon accepts payment in dollars, pounds, and euros. If you don't want to make that commitment, no worries. You could just subscribe if you have yet to. Yes, please subscribe. And when you do, or if you have already subscribed, please remember to hit the notification bell. And if you just like these videos individually, please hit that like button. I would very much appreciate it. And with that, I could say my work here is at last complete. So thank you again for watching. And I really, really do hope to see you back here again soon.